The makeshift habitat dome on Callisto wasn't much, but to 8-year-old Milo Jenkins, it was the greatest adventure playground in the solar system. While most Earth children his age were enjoying augmented reality playgrounds and gravity-adjusted sports leagues, Milo had the frigid, crater-pocked surface of Jupiter's second-largest moon all to himself. Dad, I think I fixed it." Milo's breath fogged in the habitat's perpetually chilly air as he twisted the final screw on his contraption. The device, an unholy marriage of salvaged parts, instruction manual snippets, and pure childish determination, sat proudly on his workbench. What had once been standard communication equipment, a food synthesizer interface, and parts from his father's broken drone, now resembled something between a ham radio and a modern art installation. Dr. Thomas Jenkins poked his head through the partition separating their living quarters from his research station. His beard was frosted with ice crystals from his recent excursion, and fatigue lines crinkled around his eyes. "What's that, buddy? You fixed the atmospheric regulator?" He raised an eyebrow hopefully. The dome's temperature had been dropping 3 degrees each night for a week. "No, something way better." Milo spun in his chair, grinning wildly. "Remember those old radio frequency books you brought? The ones Grandpa used when he was a kid? I made a transmitter, a real one, not the short-range garbage the council approves." Thomas's smile faltered. "Milo, we've talked about this. Our presence here isn't exactly sanctioned." I know. Milo rolled his eyes with the exaggerated suffering that only preteens can perfect. The stuffy Galactic Hegemony declared Sol a restricted development zone. "But Dad, that's exactly why this is so important." Thomas set down his specimen case, absently brushing moon dust from its surface. Inside were fragments of distinctly non-human origin. His life's work cataloging evidence that Earth wasn't the only world in the system to have hosted intelligent life. Evidence the hegemony had very explicitly forbidden humans from investigating. "Look, see these symbols?" Milo pointed to the equipment's makeshift display. "They're just like the ones on those wall fragments you found last month. I'm trying to broadcast using patterns based on the mathematical sequences you identified." Thomas felt a chill that had nothing to do with the habitat's failing heating system. "You're what?" "Milo, that equipment hasn't been tested or shielded." "That's the point. Regular broadcasts get filtered by the automated hegemony sensor nets. But if I use these weird frequencies and patterns, maybe whoever made those runes will hear us. Wouldn't that be amazing? First contact, take 2. This time we're ready." 10,000 kilometers away, aboard the Hegemony patrol vessel Obedient Enforcement, Commander Zixtor was having a thoroughly unpleasant shift. The Zelthani officer's tendrils twitched irritably as he scanned routine reports. Patrolling the quarantine zone around Sol was widely considered the least desirable posting in the Hegemony fleet, nothing but monitoring primitive humans who hadn't yet earned the right to join galactic society. "Commander," a junior officer called from the sensor station, "we're detecting unusual transmissions from Jovian moon designate CR7. Callisto, according to human naming conventions." Zixtor's upper eye ridge furrowed. "Callisto is uninhabited. The primates haven't established anything beyond that pathetic Mars colony." "Transmission patterns are unusual, sir. They appear to contain mathematical sequences consistent with—" The officer's voice dropped to a concerned whisper. "Sir, these patterns match fragments of ancient precursor communication protocols." Zixtor's posture stiffened immediately. The ancients were a subject of near religious significance, their ruins and artifacts strictly controlled by the hegemony. That some human would dare to meddle with such things was beyond insulting. "Show me," he commanded, gliding to the console. The pattern scrolling across the screen confirmed his worst suspicions. "These primitives are attempting to activate precursor technology. Unacceptable. Should we report to Central Command for investigation protocols, sir?" Zixtor made a dismissive gesture with his secondary appendage. "Investigation for primitives? This requires immediate cleansing. The regulations are clear regarding unauthorized precursor technology access." "But, sir, the treaty with Earth specifies—" "Familiar with the treaty, junior officer?" Zixtor snapped. It also specifies that humans are restricted to authorized development zones. Callisto is not among them. This is clearly a rogue operation. Prepare a cleansing package. Smallest yield, we're not savages. Back on Callisto, Milo was practically bouncing in his chair. Dad, Dad, someone's responding. Look at... Thomas rushed to the console, his face draining of color as he recognized the energy signature. Milo, shut it down, now. But Dad, we're making first contact. This could change everything. Thomas was already reaching for the emergency beacon, the one connected directly to Earth Defense Command, the one with his ex-wife's personal authentication code hardwired in, the one he'd promised never to use, except in the direst emergency. Milo, that's not a friendly response. That's a Hegemony warship and they're not sending messages, they're targeting us. Too late. The antimatter package, small scale by Hegemony standards but still devastating, was already descending through Callisto's thin atmosphere. Milo looked up, confusion replacing excitement. But why would they be mad? I just wanted to say hello. The last thing recorded on the habitat systems was Milo's voice, still filled with the innocent curiosity that defined him. Look, Dad. The antimatter charge detonated, converting a 12-kilometer radius of Callisto's surface into superheated plasma. The official Hegemony report would later classify it as routine pest elimination at an unauthorized outpost. What the report failed to mention was that the child they had just vaporized was the only son of General. The Hegemony had just made a very, very serious mistake. The Hegemony Central Command was a marvel of cosmic architecture, a sprawling megastructure orbiting a manufactured singularity that served as both power source and symbol of the Empire's technological supremacy. Within its gleaming halls, bureaucrats of 1,000 species maintained the paperwork that kept 300,000 worlds functioning with cold efficiency. In Processing Chamber 17, G, Level 4421 Junior Documentation Specialist Quiber Naril was having a terrible day. The Arthropian's mandibles clicked anxiously as another stack of incident reports materialized in his inbox. Pest elimination, trade violation, pest elimination, he muttered, stamping each with practiced indifference. Honestly, do our glorious military personnel do anything besides exterminate vermin these days? His supervisor, Senior Documentation Specialist Krex, scuttled past his workstation. Productivity down 3.7% today, Quibnarl. Remember, every unstamped report delays the Emperor's divine will by approximately 0.00002 seconds. Yes, Supervisor. Devastating indeed. Quibernaril's eye stalks drooped with sarcasm, his superior completely missed. The next report in the stack was nearly identical to the previous dozen. Commander Zixtua's impeccably formatted documentation of routine pest elimination at unauthorized outpost. Quibernaril reached for his stamp when something caught his compound eye. The coordinates. He'd been in this miserable job long enough to recognize sector designations, and these didn't match any of the standard pest-infested quadrants. That's odd, he muttered, pulling up the galactic map on his terminal. These coordinates are in... Oh no. The color drained from his exoskeleton. The coordinates were squarely in the Sol system, restricted zone 7734, the human quarantine. For 3 glorious moments, Quibernarial considered stamping the report anyway and letting someone else deal with the consequences. Then, cursing his Arthropian ethical programming, he pressed the rarely used escalation required button. 6 hours later, the report had climbed 17 bureaucratic levels, leaving a trail of increasingly panicked officials in its wake. You're telling me, Subdirector of Special Quarantine Enforcement Vixen Nalfa hissed, all 6 of her neck sacs inflating with stress, that one of our patrol ships bombed a human outpost, a species we've been specifically, carefully, deliberately avoiding direct confrontation with? It appears so, Director, her aide whispered. Commander Zixtor classified it as routine pest elimination. Pest elimination? Pest elimination? The sub-director's voice rose to a pitch that shattered 2 nearby crystalline decorations. The diplomatic corps spent 60 years negotiating the treaty that keeps those lunatics contained to their system. They're not pests. They're the species that drove the Yearl hive mind to extinction because one Yearl scout ship harvested a few thousand humans for nutrition. To be fair, Director, that was viewed as an overreaction on their part. An overreaction? The humans turned the Yearl homeworld into a parking lot. They weaponized poetry against the phasing collective. They defeated the Mechano swarm by introducing a concept called existential dread that caused the entire hive to spiral into philosophical paralysis. The sub-director collapsed into her hover chair, tendrils twitching. What outpost did we hit exactly? Please tell me it was just some automated research station. Her aide silence was answer enough. Oh, perfect, just perfect. Vix Nalpha rubbed her sensory appendages. Do we at least know who was there? The aide placed a data crystal on her desk with obvious reluctance. Preliminary analysis of debris suggests a civilian habitat. 2 life forms, an adult male and a juvenile. The sub-director's bioluminescent spots paled to near invisibility. A child? We killed a human child? Preliminary data suggests the adult was Dr. Thomas Jenkins, xenoarchaeologist. The child would be his son, Milo Jenkins. And the mother? Please tell me the child's mother is a botanist or poet or religious leader or literally anything besides General Alexandria Jenkins, commanding officer of Earth Defense Forces 1st Tactical Response Division, known in human military circles as Nightmare Jenkins after her campaign against the Earl. The silence that followed was so complete that the sub-director could hear her own circulatory fluids pumping. Well, she finally managed, at least it can't get worse. It got worse. The Grand Chamber of Imperial Wisdom was rarely used for emergency sessions. Emperor Vorthalax the Infinite preferred to make decisions while lounging in his pleasure dome, not surrounded by anxious advisors interrupting his 17-hour digestive cycle. Let me understand this correctly. The Emperor's voice resonated from all 6 of his speech organs simultaneously. One of our patrol commanders exterminated 2 humans who were illegally present on a moon in their own system, and now you're suggesting we apologize. High Chancellor Zex Morfat's tendrils trembled. Your luminance, the human in question, was the offspring of their most decorated military commander. According to our cultural analysts, humans exhibit extreme attachment to their young. They consider harm to offspring to be the most severe provocation possible. More severe than territorial incursion? The Emperor asked. Yes, Your Luminance. More severe than resource competition? Significantly, Your Luminance. More severe than direct challenges to dominance? Their entertainment media suggests humans will forgive almost any offense except harm to their offspring, Your Luminance. Emperor's Vorthalax's feeding tentacles coiled thoughtfully. And this particular offspring belonged to a military commander? What is her designation? General Alexandria Jenkins, Your Luminance, known as Nightmare. Charming. The Emperor's bioluminescence pulsed with amusement. And what exactly am I supposed to fear from a single human female? Does she possess reality-altering abilities? Can she single-handedly overthrow our empire of 300,000 worlds? The gathered advisors exchanged uncomfortable glances. Your Luminance, ventured the Minister of Interspecies Intelligence, this particular human has a concerning tactical record. During the Yearl incursion, she commanded a force that was outnumbered approximately 400 to 1, yet achieved total victory through unorthodox methods. Unorthodox how? The Emperor demanded. She weaponized the Yearl's own biological processes against them. Then she sent their queen a recording of human children laughing, which their intelligence misinterpreted as the sound of imminent death. A different advisor chimed in. She also intercepted a Praxian dreadnought by convincing them her destroyer was actually a pleasure cruise carrying intoxicated dignitaries. They let her approach within weapons range before realizing their error. The Emperor's annoyance was evident in the darkening of his central carapace. Enough! It's just one human child. Surely they wouldn't risk interstellar war over such a trivial matter. High Chancellor Zex Mofat cleared his throat sacs nervously. Your luminance about interstellar war. We should discuss the modified Newton event. The what? Several cycles ago, when a Hegemony scout ship attempted to claim an asteroid in human territory, they responded by accelerating it to 0.5 c and aiming it at an uninhabited planet in our space as a demonstration. The kinetic impact was impressive. They sent a message afterward saying, "Next time, we won't choose an empty target." The Emperor's feeding tentacles coiled tightly against his thorax. After a long moment of silence, he waved dismissively. Fine. Send a diplomatic communique expressing our regrets for this unfortunate incident. Offer appropriate compensation according to their customs. What do humans consider valuable? Rare minerals? Computational resources? According to our research, a cultural attaché ventured, traditional human grief compensation would include flowers, a casserole, and thoughts and prayers. The Emperor's bioluminescent patches flickered with what might have been relief. Excellent. Send the females some flowers and computational thoughts. Matter resolved. As the Imperial advisors filed out, the Minister of Interspecies Intelligence lingered behind. Your luminance, he said quietly. Perhaps as a precaution, we should increase security around key hegemony installations. Just temporarily. Emperor's Vortalax's eye stalk swiveled irritably. If it will ease your paranoia, very well. But I refuse to believe the hegemony, with our millions of warships and billions of soldiers, has anything to fear from one grieving human female. The minister bowed deeply, hiding his expression. Of course, your luminance. After all, what's the worst she could do? The Kuiper Belt war games stretched across millions of kilometers of space, holographic enemy fleets dancing between frozen asteroids as Earth's military commanders honed their skills. General Alexandria Nightmare Jenkins stood on the bridge of the EDF Relentless, silver-streaked black hair framing a face that rarely betrayed emotion. Blue team pinned down in Sector 7, her tactical officer reported. Green team establishing crossfire. Jenkins nodded. Predictable. Have blue team execute pattern Epsilon 7. General Jenkins, the communications officer's voice cut through the tactical chatter. Priority message from Earth Defense Command, Admiral Chen's personal channel. The bridge fell silent. I'll take it in my ready room, Jenkins said, her voice betraying nothing. Admiral Chen's hologram materialized as soon as the door closed. His composed face showed evident strain. Alexandria, he said, using her first name, a warning sign. There's been an incident. It's Thomas and Milo. Their research outpost on Callisto was... There was a Hegemony patrol vessel. For precisely 3.6 seconds, General Alexandria Jenkins ceased to function as the tactical genius who had rewritten Earth's military doctrine. She became simply a mother, her mind frantically rejecting the information. Confirmed? She asked, her voice hollow. Yes, the Hegemony has already sent what they consider a formal apology. They classified it as pest elimination at an unauthorized outpost. Callisto was within sole jurisdiction, Jenkins interrupted, compartmentalizing her pain with practiced efficiency. The treaty explicitly acknowledges all Jovian moons as human territory. I'd like to request immediate leave, Admiral. Family emergency. Chen shifted uncomfortably. Of course, as much time as you need. The Council has also suspended your command authorizations, as is standard for bereavement. I'm going to my cabin in the Cascades, Admiral, to grieve, as is appropriate. Her voice was perfectly even. Chen studied her for a long moment. Your leave is approved, effective immediately. 3 days later, in a monitoring station beneath the North American Defense Complex, Lieutenant Park and Specialist Zhang watched surveillance feeds with increasing unease. 48 hours in that cabin and nothing, Park muttered. No movement except to get water, no communications. She hasn't even turned on a light. The main screen showed a thermal image of Jenkins's isolated mountain cabin. A single human heat signature remained in the same position it had been for hours. Maybe she's in shock, Zhang suggested. Nightmare Jenkins doesn't do shock, Park replied. During the Battle of Ceres, she had her arm severed by shrapnel. She cauterized it herself with a plasma torch and continued directing the battle for 16 more hours. Zhang whistled low. I've heard the stories, but I thought they were exaggerated. Wait, she's moving. On screen, Jenkins's heat signature stood and moved purposefully through the cabin. Lights came on for the first time in 2 days. Is she packing a bag? Zhang squinted at the screen. Alert, Command, Park said. She's on the move. Major Elena Rodriguez waited at the New Mexico spaceport as Jenkins arrived, wearing civilian clothes and carrying a standard military duffel bag. Her face showed no evidence of tears or fatigue. Only her eyes revealed a cold focus Rodriguez had seen only during the final push against the Iril hive mind. General, I didn't expect to see you here. I'm requesting access to my personal vessel. The bad decision? Rodriguez couldn't hide her surprise. Ma'am, with respect, you're on bereavement leave. The bad decision is registered as my personal property, Jenkins stated flatly. I'm legally entitled to access it regardless of my duty status. Rodriguez shifted uncomfortably. Command is concerned about your intentions. My intentions are my own, Major. Jenkins' expression softened fractionally. But if it helps you file your report, tell Admiral Chen I'm taking a vacation. A vacation? Rodriguez's disbelief was evident. The Hegemony just killed your son. Jenkins adjusted the strap of her duffel bag. Perhaps vacation is the wrong word. Let's call it an educational expedition. I believe the Hegemony needs to understand the concept of consequences. Whatever you're planning, I'm just taking a vacation to meet some new friends, the kind that need to understand certain concepts. Meanwhile, the United Earth Defense Council's emergency session ran for 6 hours before Admiral Chen's aide rushed in with news of Jenkins's departure. General Jenkins has taken the bad decision and left Earth space. Trajectory suggests she's heading for the Kuiper Belt Gateway. We have to stop her, the EU representative insisted. This could trigger interstellar war. Minister Okonkwo studied the tactical display before chuckling softly. What's funny about this situation? Someone demanded. I was just thinking about why we instituted the quarantine in the first place, Okonkwo replied. It wasn't to keep aliens out. It was to keep us in, Chen finished quietly. To protect the rest of the galaxy from humanity. And now the Hegemony gets to learn why we quarantined ourselves. So we do nothing? On the contrary, Minister Okonkwo replied. We prepare our diplomatic corps for the inevitable surrender negotiations. I suspect they'll be calling much sooner than anyone expects. The bad decision vanished from all tracking systems 6 hours after departure. Earth Defense Command confirmed what they already suspected. General Jenkins had activated the experimental quantum shadow drive, rendering her ship effectively invisible to all known detection methods. 3 standard cycles later, reports began flooding into Hegemony's Central Command. On Detention Moon SK-471, security personnel arrived for their shift to find a baffling situation. All prison guards locked securely in detention cells, their access codes scrambled, and every single political prisoner, over 300 dissidents from 17 species, gone without a trace. Security recordings showed nothing but static. At the Militech supply hub in the Orion Arm, inventory drones reported a discrepancy that initially registered as a software error. Further investigation revealed that an entire shipment of next-generation disruptor cannons had been replaced with exquisitely crafted replicas made from soft polymers. Each toy weapon featured a handwritten note, ages 3 and up, not suitable for species lacking a sense of humor. Most alarming was the incident aboard the luxury yacht Infinite Splendor. The vessel, carrying 12 high-ranking Hegemony officials on a pleasure cruise, unexpectedly dropped out of hyperspace when its navigation system malfunctioned. Emergency protocols engaged automatically, placing the ship into a holding pattern while broadcasting distress signals. When rescue vessels arrived, they discovered the yacht's precise movements had traced a massive pattern visible only from specific coordinates in orbit. The human phrase, "coming for you," spanning 50,000 kilometers of empty space. Empress Vortalax was not amused. "Find this human immediately," he commanded, tendrils writhing with agitation. "This embarrassment cannot continue." Commander Zixtor, hastily promoted to admiral after his routine pest elimination sparked the crisis, bowed deeply. "I will not fail you, your luminance." Meanwhile, aboard the Bad Decision, now hidden in an asteroid field near the former prison moon, General Jenkins surveyed her unlikely crew. Former professors, journalists, and political activists from across the hegemony stood at attention, their eyes bright with something long absent: hope. "You were imprisoned for speaking truth to power," Jenkins addressed them, "for questioning hegemony expansion, for demanding basic rights. I freed you not to fight a war, but to help me teach a lesson." A Thraxian scholar raised her upper appendage. "What lesson exactly?" Jenkins smiled thinly. "That consequence don't care about size differences. A venomous insect can kill a creature 1,000 times larger, if it knows where to sting." The stolen military supplies proved perfect for Jenkins's unorthodox campaign. Hegemony communication relays suddenly broadcast children's music across military channels. Administrative centers found their gravity controls inverted. Food synthesizers produced nothing but human breakfast cereals. With each incident, Admiral Zextor grew more obsessed, deploying ever larger forces to regions where Jenkins had already come and gone. He didn't realize he was being studied, his responses catalogued, his weaknesses noted, all part of a trap, slowly closing around him. The transmission began simultaneously across all hegemony communication channels: personal devices, public displays, military comms, even the Emperor's private meditation chamber. The encryption protocols meant to prevent such system-wide overrides were bypassed with insulting ease. A human female appeared on every screen, her military bearing unmistakable despite civilian attire. Her silver-streaked dark hair framed a face carved from determination. "Greetings, citizens of the Galactic Hegemony. I am General Alexandria Jenkins of Earth. Some of you may be wondering about the inconveniences you've experienced lately." In the Imperial Palace, Emperor Vortalak's tendrils coiled with rage as security personnel frantically tried to terminate the broadcast. "Admiral Zixtor," Jenkins continued, her voice perfectly calm, "I believe congratulations are in order for your promotion. Quite the reward for ordering the death of my 8-year-old son, Milo." The broadcast shifted to display footage from Callisto, the final moments of the research outpost, the antimatter strike, then detailed images of Admiral Zixtor and his patrol vessel. "I want to be perfectly clear about my intentions," Jenkins continued as her face reappeared. "I am not seeking vengeance. I am providing education. The hegemony has operated for millennia under the assumption that technological superiority equals moral authority, that lesser species can be categorized as pests to be eliminated when inconvenient." Her eyes hardened. "This educational course will demonstrate why humans voluntarily quarantined ourselves from galactic society. It wasn't fear. It was restraint." The broadcast displayed a cascade of classified hegemony documents, security protocols, military deployments, and, most damning, evidence of systematic subjugation of dozens of developing civilizations. "Your empire is built on exploitation," Jenkins stated flatly. "The 17 species comprising the Hegemony Council control 300,000 worlds by keeping the other 8,000 subject species divided, dependent, and afraid." She leaned closer to the camera. "But they're not afraid anymore, and neither am I." The transmission ended with a simple countdown clock, 72 hours. "A grieving mother throwing a tantrum," Emperor Vortalax declared to the assembled media drones, his bioluminescent patches pulsing with calculated confidence. "This terrorist will be captured promptly." The moment the broadcast ended, he turned to his security chief. "Triple the palace guard. Deploy the reserved fleet. Lock down every critical system in the Empire." Across the chamber, Admiral Zixtor stared at the security display, his tendrils trembling with sudden understanding. The prison break, the stolen weapons, the yacht incident. They weren't random attacks. They were data collection operations. Each response had revealed another layer of hegemony security protocols, Each deployment had been tracked, each communication intercepted. For weeks, the human hadn't been running from them, she'd been studying them, and they had taught her everything she needed to know. Eternal Dominion Day transformed the hegemony capital world of Vorthalax Prime into a spectacle of imperial might. Massive holoprojectors displayed conquered worlds, while atmosphere processors created brilliant auroras spelling out 10000 years of enlightened rule in 17 official languages. Celebration was mandatory. Citizens who failed to display sufficient enthusiasm were noted by ever-present surveillance drones. Security had never been tighter. After the humans' broadcast, planetary shields operated at 200% capacity, warships patrolled in triple formation, and identity scans occurred every 30 seconds in public spaces, which made it all the more shocking when every display simultaneously switched to new footage precisely as the Emperor began his traditional speech. The recording was simple, an 8-year-old human child excitedly showing his father a homemade communication device. Then the antimatter strike. The child's final words, "I think they want to be friends," echoed across the stunned capital. Before the shocked silence could break, the broadcast continued, shifting to meticulously documented footage of hegemony pacification operations, a peaceful aquatic species watching their oceans boiled away for mineral extraction, a telepathic civilization having their communication organs harvested while still conscious, pest control operations against species whose only crime was developing technology without hegemony permission. Each atrocity was time-stamped, location verified, and linked to specific hegemony directives, many bearing the Emperor's personal authorization code. In his palace, Emperor Vorthalax's rage manifested as bioluminescent pulses that temporarily blinded his attendants. "Find her," he shrieked at Admiral Zixtor. "Destroy anything you must. Burn our own facilities if necessary. Just find that." But Alexandria Jenkins was already gone, her presence on the capital nothing but a carefully crafted illusion created by reprogrammed security systems. Across hegemony space, the carefully maintained social order began to fracture. On 17 core worlds, citizens gathered in unprecedented protest. On colony planets, subject species whispered of resistance. In military installations, recruits from lesser species looked at their weapons with new purpose. 3 hegemony dreadnoughts cornered what sensors identified as the bad decision near a nebula in the Cygnus Arm. They launched a full barrage of planet-killer missiles, only to discover they'd targeted a holographic decoy. The real bad decision emerged behind them, disabled their engines with surgical precision, and vanished again before reinforcements arrived. "It's impossible to predict her movements," Zixtor confessed to the Emperor's War Council. "She employs what their military terms chaos strategy, deliberately irrational tactical choices designed to counter predictive algorithms." "Explain," the Emperor demanded. "Our military planning relies on optimal strategic calculations. The human deliberately makes suboptimal choices, sacrificing efficiency for unpredictability. Our analysts believe humans developed this approach specifically to counter advanced prediction systems. They call it thinking outside the box, though the translation is imperfect." "Are you saying," the Emperor's feeding tentacles coiled tightly, "that she's defeating us by being deliberately stupid?" "Not stupid, your Luminatums," Zixtor corrected cautiously. "Chaotic. And in chaos, she finds patterns we cannot see." Admiral Zixtor's fleet surrounded the abandoned space station Nexus 7717, 7 dreadnoughts, 18 cruisers, and 42 assault craft. After weeks of humiliation, he would finally capture the human terrorist. "Deploy shock troops," he ordered. "I want her alive, but if she resists, disintegration is authorized." The assault team breached the station, ready for a desperate last stand. Instead, they found General Alexandria Jenkins calmly sitting at a console. "Ah, Admiral Zixtor, you're 37 seconds later than I calculated." She stood, hands raised. "I surrender, by the way, completely and unconditionally. If I may offer some tactical advice, human restraints should include both wrist and ankle bindings. We're considerably more flexible than Zelthani." Zixtor's suspicion was quickly overwhelmed by triumph. The imperial throne room was packed for the spectacle of Jenkins' public execution. Despite being forced to her knees before Emperor Vorthalax, her posture remained eerily dignified. Alexandria Jenkins, you stand accused of terrorism against the Galactic Hegemony. Do you deny these charges? Jenkins met the Emperor's gaze directly. I'm exactly where I need to be, where my voice can be heard by you directly. That was the purpose of everything I've done. Your Luminance, the prisoner is attempting to, Zixtor began. I could have killed you, Jenkins continued calmly. Not just you, Emperor, but every member of your High Council. Your palace security was compromised 16 days ago. The Emperor's bioluminescence flickered with alarm. I had access to your life support systems, your food synthesizers, your atmospheric controls. But that's not what my son would have wanted. Your son was a pest, Zixtor spat. My son was trying to make friends. His last words were about connection, not conflict. Her voice softened. So instead of killing your leaders, I've done something far more meaningful. Alarms suddenly blared throughout the palace. Displays flashed red as the Emperor's guard rushed to surround him. What is happening? The Emperor demanded. Jenkins smiled. Education, your Luminance. I've transmitted your military codes, defense protocols, and fleet deployments to representatives of every subjugated species in your empire. 8,000 previously disconnected resistance movements are coordinating their first synchronized actions. The displays showed simultaneous uprisings across dozens of worlds, hegemony installations under attack, subject species declaring independence. My son died reaching out to make contact with new friends, Jenkins said as chaos erupted. His last act was one of connection, not destruction. I'm honoring him by giving others the chance to be heard. The Emperor's feeding tentacles coiled in fury. You've started a war that will kill billions. No, Jenkins replied. I've ended an empire that has already killed trillions. The difference matters. 6 hours after Jenkins' revelation, the hegemony was collapsing. The Emperor's supposedly secret bunker had been compromised, not by assassins, but by waiting representatives from subjugated species bearing terms of surrender. In the throne room, now an emergency command center, Jenkins watched Admiral Zixtor receive increasingly desperate reports. 17 core worlds facing protests, 46 colonial systems declared independence. The 7th Fleet has defected entirely. Jenkins sipped water, looking almost sympathetic. You built a society on the assumption that technological superiority guaranteed dominance. But technology can be shared. The real power was always in connection. Emperor Vorthalax returned, his presence diminished, followed by representatives of formerly subjugated species. The Emperor has been presented with terms, announced a crystalline being. What terms? Zixtor demanded. The formation of a new Interstellar Cooperative, Jenkins explained. Equal representation for all sentient species. No more pest control or cleansing strikes. Impossible. The council races cannot. 3 of your council worlds have already joined, including your homeworld, Admiral. The Emperor addressed Jenkins directly. You arranged all of this without firing a single lethal shot. Violence would have only reinforced your belief that other species are savages. This way you face the far more terrifying prospect of having to communicate as equals. 6 months later, the first assembly of the Interstellar Cooperative convened in the renamed Hall of Equal Voices. General Jenkins, now Earth's ambassador, was surprised to find Zixtor representing a reformist Zeltani faction. Ambassador Jenkins, he acknowledged stiffly. Ambassador Zixtor, I wouldn't have expected you to embrace the new order. His tendrils shifted uncomfortably. My efficient decision caused incalculable suffering, not just to your son but to countless others deemed insignificant. It seems I have much to learn about significance. Jenkins studied him thoughtfully. My grief taught me that every life matters across the galaxy. My son's death, while unforgivable, created change that saved billions. 1 year after Milo's death, Alexandria stood on Callisto at the site of the outpost. Beside a small monument stood something new, a powerful communication array. She activated it, broadcasting Milo's original patterns, modified to say in mathematical language, "Hello, we're listening, we want to be friends." The Milo Jenkins Foundation for Interstellar Communication had converted her military budget to funding cultural exchange programs. Where warships once patrolled, research vessels now explored. Alexandria placed her hand on the monument. This is what you would have wanted, not revenge, connection. As she turned to leave, her communicator chimed with an alert. The array had received a response from a region of space beyond Hegemony charts. Someone new was reaching back.